Cray Cross Epic, Chapter 1, Hero from Whom, Episode 2, Radylina and Kheios. The Bioroid youth, Roawa, and the drag-ritter girl, Radylina, had escaped to a stone temple surrounding the World Tree. It was the only place to escape to. With a body from which a decaying arm had been torn off, it was hard for him to keep balance, and his legs felt like they were going to give way. Somehow, he managed to hold it together, running up the stairs and through the long corridor when he heard a voice, as striking as a whip, ahead of him. "This way!" In desperation, he turned the other way. But from that same direction, he could hear the sound of multiple footsteps, stamping against the stone floor. They were trapped. As he desperately searched for a place to escape, Roawa's eyes fell upon a door, left slightly ajar, through which a faint light was leaking. He immediately clenched his stomach. "Come!" shouted Roawa, grabbing Radylina's arm. She instantly understood his intention, and the both of them dashed into the room together. The room was so dimly lit, with only a single small light, that they were unable to even tell how big it was. The duo and the small dragon held their breath in the dimness as they tightly pressed their bodies against the door. They could hear the sound of the guards running through the corridor beyond the door. Eventually, the sound of the footsteps faded away, and the only sound was their breathing. "They're gone, right?" It was Radylina who said that. "Yeah, probably." It was Roawa who answered. "I think you should wait a little longer." It was a man unbeknownst to them who whispered. The two turned around and saw a demon man in dark-colored vestments standing close to them. The man snapped his fingers, and the faint room light flared up until it shone brightly. It was only then that the duo realized that the room they had entered was a luxurious guest room. Upon the smooth, rugged carpet was a richly draped canopy bed. The gold embroidery glittered like a myriad of stars. There stood the man in a relaxed manner. If he was a human, he would probably be around 30 years old. But considering that he was of the demon race, one could not really be sure. At first glance, he looked skinny, but he had a lean figure, and in his hand was an old, gilded book into which 7 differently colored sparkling gems were embedded. His visage upon which was also a halo crown, even seemed to be amused by the sudden intrusion. "Visitors, I presume? Would you like some tea? The sun will be up soon, so how about an early breakfast?" "No thanks." Radylina's hand quickly returned to the hilt of her sword. "Ah, would you prefer some meat instead then?" "No. I see. Ah." The man held up his index finger as he seemed to come up with an idea. "Milk." "Who are you?" interrupted Radylina in a stubborn tone. With a sad shrug, the man replied, "I'm Kheios. Nice to meet you, drag-ritter girl." "Kheios. I've heard of that name before. He was sent to this city by the military to pass on the teachings of the founding father, Stokea. I heard that he was now a freeloader at this temple." "That's right. I'm indebted to this place. And what would your name be?" "Rady. This here is the proud dragon Momoke." Leaning over Radylina's shoulder, the child dragon Momoke cheerfully greeted him. "How very polite of you." Kheios in exchange took a bow. Roawa also opened his mouth in a hurry. "I'm Roawa." Kheios' eyes stopped at the dirt-covered figure of Roawa. His clothes were so close to the point of crumbling away that Radylina had mistaken him for a zombie. In fact, when he was running away, it had not even crossed his mind that area might have been exposed. "Roawa, my boy, you have quite an interesting fashion sense. I know that's what's popular with young people now, right? Despite how I look, I'm quite knowledgeable on that kind of stuff." "Yeah, I think it's very good on you." Apologizing to cheery Kheios, who had his thumbs up, Roawa softly replied, "No, I'm this dirty because I was buried in the ground, maybe for around 3,000 years or so." "Of course I knew that." 3,000 years? As expected, he had not been paying attention. Kheios' dark eyes widened. "Yes, it would seem that 3,000 years have passed while I was sleeping. Even I find it hard to believe." Dragons that have lived for thousands of years, eternally youthful, an immortal ghost. There are so many species that live for long periods of time, with bioroids being eternally youthful. However, they are not immortal. I do not know of any bioroids that have lived for 3,000 years. Yes, I have no clue as to what happened to me either. Kheios put his finger to his temple and pondered for a while, then let out a breath and smiled. Then let us see for ourselves. Time that is like a torrent. With that, the book in Kheios' hand began to float, while emanating a pale ring of light. He slid his fingers across the pages, as if stroking them. The old pages began to roll past by themselves, coming to stop at a certain point. Let the memories of the long past be reflected upon my eyes. In that moment, bands of colored light overflowed from the book. They twisted and entwined, eventually forming an image of light in the air. It was a field of wheat with golden ears. The sight was so familiar to him that Roa could not help let out a surprised voice. Indeed, this was the wheat field where he and Olivia had traveled to. Unconsciously, he reached for the image, but in the blink of an eye, it had been transformed into a desolate land. It was 3,000 years ago, this unremarkable place, famous for its wheat and other crops, was suddenly struck by a great calamity. The cause was unknown, but the trees and plants turned to white ash and decayed away. It was thought to be hopeless. But then, a world tree sprouted here, growing to great size in a flash. It healed the decaying lands. That seems to be the reason why this city has flourished. This temple where we are was built to protect the world tree. What does this have to do with him? Nodding at Radylina's question, Kheios slid his finger further. The distant view of the lush world tree switched to show the roots of the tree. Looking carefully, you could see something that looked like a person. With skin brown and knotted like a tree, at first glance, it looked like a tree dryad. Surely he had been caught up in a disaster. At the root of the world tree slept a wooden-turned bioroid boy. And no matter what the people did, he could never be awoken. Eventually, the boy, exposed to the winds and the rain, was buried in the earth, and he disappeared, forgotten by the people. Closing the book, Kheios smiled at Roa. That would be you, Roa. That's probably right. Welcome to 3,000 years into the future. I'm glad to meet such a witness to history. Do you want a cookie? Are you perhaps hungry? No, I'm fine. I see. Kheios' handsome visage was clouded in disappointment. Suddenly he looked up. I know. I can't leave you covered in dirt. When Kheios snapped his finger, a soft blue light enveloped Roa's body. In no time at all, the dirt that had been stuck to his body had been cleansed, and his coarse discomfort disappeared. Of course, his left arm had not recovered, and when he touched the cross-section, it felt like a withered tree. Oh, you look charming. But as expected, your clothes seem to have rotted away. Makani, are you there? Yes, over here. Suddenly, a voice came from the dimness of the room, and a man emerged, as if he had materialized. He was of the alien race. By human terms, he would appear to be in his mid-20s. He had white hair and was tall, with a well-built body, was wrapped in a white suit. The eyes behind his glasses were devoid of emotion, and together with his pale blue irises, they could be described as icy. Only the leather gloves around his hand, which were disproportionately large to his body, had a dull black sheen. I want you to prepare some clothes for him. Naturally something fashionable. As you wish, Master Kheios. The man called Makani bowed deeply and disappeared without a sound. Of course, since he was not a ghost, it would be more appropriate to say he left. But since there was so little sign of him, it seemed as he vanished to Roa. Makani is my right-hand man. He's a very good worker, taking care of my personal security, keeping my schedule, cleaning, doing the laundry, and he makes a delicious plum jam. Would you like some? No thanks. With his words being guessed and declined before he could say them, Kheios' head dejectedly dropped. It seemed that he really wanted to serve Roa and Radylina some tea. In all honesty, they were not in the mood for some, nor did they have the time. Could I ask you a question? Go ahead. 3,000 years ago, I was traveling with an olive bioroid named Olivia. Do you know what happened to him? Say, for example, were there other bioroids like me who were buried in the ground? My history record contains multitude of memories, but history is a large river and can't keep track of the small streams. Sorry, I don't know who he is. I see. It had been 3,000 years. He was probably dead by now. But he could not let go of these feelings. He could not give up. After all, it felt like it was only yesterday that he and Olivia were laughing together. Unable to hide his mixed feelings, he looked down at his feet, when he felt a big hand on his shoulder. Looking up, Roa saw Kheios, with his hand on his shoulder, nodding vigorously. Don't give up. Maybe he too is buried in the ground just like you. Maybe he'll wake up today, or even tomorrow. After all, we don't know why you fell asleep, or why you woke up now, do we? I'm sure that Master Sokea would say, never give up. Yeah, that's right. Even though he knew it was just said in consolation, the kindness saved Roa. Putting on an awkward smile, he returned to his usual self. Okay, I understand young Roa's circumstances. So why are you here at this hour, young Rady? This is the World Tree Temple, which I believe is a restricted area? Thinking that the conversation had just been between Kheios and Roa, Radylina was caught off guard and her face stiffened. Before I knew it, I found myself here. You must be a very active sleepwalker. Ugh. She groaned as the very words that she had directed at Roa earlier now bounced back at her. It would seem that she was terrible at telling lies. Her confusion must have been transmitted to the dragon, because Momoke was circling her shoulders, whimpering. Holding his index finger, Kheios said, Let me guess. The Fire Regalius, right? You know of it? Radylina energetically picked herself up and immediately covered her mouth with a ah. Kheios chuckled as she could not escape. Roa, who was watching the two talk, had no idea what they were talking about. Fire what? The Fire Regalias. They were said to be an immense power that brings prosperity and calamity. Of course, I've never actually seen one, so I don't exactly know what they are or what they look like. But there seems to be many rumors about it. I heard that a Fire Regalius, with its immense power, can make anyone's wishes come true. And that one of them was buried in the roots of the World Tree. I see. That's why there's been so many gods out lately and about. I have no idea about how such a rumor got out there, Kheios sighed. So, young Rady snuck in at night and dug up a big catch. Being you, young Roa. I mean, you wouldn't normally think that a person would be buried there, now would you? And the ground was glowing. I thought that it was it. Glowing? Roa responded reflectively. He could not overlook that. That's impossible. Mycelia like glow, but not Rowan's. But it was glowing! He could only tilt his head to the side at Radylina's stubborn words. This was a non-negotiable part of his identity. I was asleep, so I didn't use any magic. You must have been seeing something wrong. It was a green flash. How could I have mistaken it? Then their conversation was interrupted by the sounds of knocking. Everyone in the area turned to see Makani, expressionlessly holding an emerald green cloth while knocking on the wall with his finger. Master Kheios, the clothes are ready. As expected of Makani, fast at work. Now, young Roa, the night has ended. Get dressed and let's go into town. It's my duty to lead the young. Well, this is when I go. Bye-bye. Goodbye! Kheios forcefully grabbed Radylina's shoulder as she quickly tried to turn to leave, his smile unwavering. Young Rady, despite how it seems I'm quite busy, I'm not sure if I can entertain a guest from 3,000 years ago. It'd be a relief to have some pointers from a girl. This is but another chance encounter, don't you think? That you should take care of young Roa? No. Guards! Guards! There's an intruder here! Ugh. Then we're set. With absolutely no intentions of joining the conversation, Roa pretended not to hear them as he was getting dressed. When they stepped out of Kheios' guest room, the sky was already bright with the morning sun. They could see a flock of birds flying across the sky. There were multiple footsteps, and the guards who had been chasing Roa and Radylina appeared from the other sides of the corridor, one of them with their berry knife lowered, approaching them. Master Kheios, have you seen any intruders? Who are these two? I don't think they were on the visitors list. Kheios let out an oops before the sharp gaze of the guard. That's right. Kheios held up his index finger. They're my illegitimate children. Radylina was so reluctant to the idea that she almost jumped at him, but Roa quickly covered her mouth and somehow prevented her from cursing. Oh, you know, puberty. They usually go, "Shut up, old man." Uh-huh. I see. Sorry for the inconvenience. As such, the three of them left the sanctuary and went into town.